Hi, this week we're going to be doing the Writer of the Week. This is a writer that I didn't know a whole lot about, even though obviously after doing all my research, I found out that I love this guy, man. He was a great writer, especially for a young man in the 60s. He wrote tons of stuff that I loved. And I'm hoping that when I get done that maybe you'll recognize some of the titles and then maybe even go back and try them. A lot of them are in reprint form now. His name is Arnold Drake, and he has quite a career. I guarantee you, me researching this, I couldn't even begin to tap into a lot of the stuff that he has done. I mainly looked up for things that would be familiar with a lot of comic collectors out there, and hopefully future comic collectors. Arnold Drake was born in 1924 to a Manhattan furniture dealer, and grew up a fairly normal life in that place. At the age of 12, he decided he wanted to start drawing comics, so I assume he was collecting some of them back in those days. Unfortunately, he contracted scarlet fever and was confined to a bed for a year. Man, what a bummer that must have been, laying there waiting to do something. But in an interview later on, he stated that as he lay there waiting to get better, the artwork that he envisioned he wanted to do kept getting smaller and smaller, and the word balloons got bigger and bigger. In other words, he lost interest in art, maybe due to the fact that he couldn't probably do it, maybe, I don't know. But he obviously got into writing, and I got to tell you, I'm glad he did, because I thought he was one hell of a writer for his time. So anyway, this did lead to him to becoming a writer as he got older. He studied later on as journalism at the University of Missouri and later at New York University. And from there, he embarked on his career. And it is believed that his first public work that he did was It Rhymes with Lust, under the name of Drake Waller. This was what's called a proto-graphic novel comics magazine that sold on newsstands in 1950. You'll see a photo here. Later, he met a neighbor of one of his brothers, who it turns out was Bob Kane of Batman fame. And Kane liked what Drake was doing and collaborated on a few projects. And then Kane later on introduced him to the editors at DC Comics. His first DC work was an 8-page story in Batman number 98, The Return of Mr. Future. He began scripting all sorts of stories all across different genres at DC at that point. Showcase number 1, very important series, Fireman Feral, Tommy Tomorrow, Adventures of Bob Hope, Adventures of Jerry Lewis, House of Secrets, Space Ranger, and the Tales of the Unexpected, and even more that I can probably name here or even find. His biggest work, though, was when he started in 1962 with his friend Bob Haney. They discovered a comic company distributed by, I guess, from what I read, it was National Periodical Publications Independent News, and it was called Marvel Comics. They looked at some of this stuff as it came out and warned DC about them. But as we all know, DC didn't listen, and they kept doing the same stuff, which is fine with me as a kid growing up. But, Marvel was able to advance to become number one and has pretty much stayed there ever since then. In 1963, Drake was approached by DC to develop a feature for an anthology series they had called My Greatest Adventures. In My Greatest Adventures number 80, he created a group called the Doom Patrol. And I'm sure a lot of people are aware of the Doom Patrol. His Doom Patrol was pretty straight superhero stuff compared to the newer stuff that you're seeing on TV these days. But Drake wanted a feature that was similar in character development like Marvel, and so that's why Doom Patrol came to be. He would write this book until the book died out in issue number 121, and he would move on move on to other things. But during this time, Drake would create such great books as Stanley and His Monster, premiered in Fox and Crow in number 95. He brought back the Plastic Man that DC acquired the rights to, I guess. Only ran issues 1 through 10. He then created one of DC's long-standing characters, though he only did one issue of it, I believe, which was 205, called Strange Adventures, and it featured a new character called Deadman. Great character, by the way. Neil Adams would grab a hold of it and later on and take it to great new heights. And to this day, he's still a very good character. He also did work on some of my favorite books I had in the 60s. They were Challengers of the Unknown. And he started doing that with number 18 and did most of them till about number 63. Did a few Batman books, some Black Hawk books, 196 to 198. Did Phantom Stranger in like, I think, 75, number 27 through 34 and number 37. And then he just did a bunch of other miscellaneous work. He also decided to do a little freelance work with that company he warned DC about called Marvel. And he started with doing the original Captain Marvel number 5 up through 12 in 68 and 69. And he would later also during that time do a book called Marvel Superheroes number 18. He created the original Guardians of the Galaxy, done with great artwork by the great Gene Colan. And then he would do the following issue with a character called Kazar. And then later moved to Not Brand Ek, 11 through 13, one issue of Captain Savage, and then of course he did what probably my first Marvel work I ever read of his, which was X-Men, number 47 through 54. And there, I'm jealous. He got to work with Jim Steranko, who was doing a lot of work at Marvel at the time, and he also got to see the new artist from, I believe, Britain. I think he's from Britain, Barry Windsor Smith. He did one issue of it in his early days. It was great stuff. But he would leave Marvel after all this, and then he would go not back to DC necessarily, but he went to a company called Gold Key and started creating some of their newer books. And he had done some of these books, I think, even earlier on than this, as I did my research. But some of the titles were like Grimm's Ghost Stories, an anthology horror book that he did for them. He also did Boris Karloff's Tales of Mystery. Also got on board to do Dark Shadows, later on with Star Trek, and then Twilight Zone, to name some. And surprisingly, I found out that he did quite a long stint on a book called Little Lulu that Gold Key had. And that book's been around since the 40s. And he did like 215 and 231 upwards to 268. And then it was canceled because Gold Key disappeared after that. He also did one thing which I took a long time for me to find this. It was an anthology sci-fi comic book that ran 4 issues called Starstream. It was done under the Whitman brand, which is what Gold Key turned into. And that was a fun comic to read. It was all science fiction. And for me, it was hard to find all 4 issues, but I did find them. By 1981, Drake became an executive director of the Veterans Bedside Network, an organization to which actors, actresses, and sound engineers would perform scripted material to entertain patients in a Veterans Administration hospitals in the greater New York City area. I admire him for doing something like that. And he was still continuing to do stuff on and off. I couldn't find much on it, but what I did find was they believe his last known work was for DC, called DC's GI Combat number 276, where he introduced a character called the GI Samurai. He did show up later. I don't know if this is true. I couldn't find anything on it really. In Heavy Metal Volume 26, number 6, with the story Tripping Out, illustrated by Luis Dominguez. After that, the only thing that I found was that DC was reprinting the Doom Patrol stuff, and he wrote a foreword for Doom Patrol Archives number 1. And then afterward, when Dark Horse reprinted his very first work, It Rhymes with Lust. It was sad to say that he passed away in 2007. And in 2008, he was inducted posthumously with the Will Eisner Award for his work. And believe me, he deserved it with the amount of work that he did, and as much as it was fun to read it. I found out during this time he wrote 2 movie screenplays. Whether they got made or not, I don't know. Called The Flesh Eaters in 1964 and Who Killed Teddy Bear in 1966. He also wrote some lyrics with his brother for a book I think that his brother was working on called The Oils of Araby in 1980. I will say that, Arnold Drake had, I thought, quite a career. Much bigger and vaster than I thought it was when I started this. And I loved it because he worked on so many books that I personally loved and wanted to collect. Challenge of the Unknown, Blackhawks, Doom Patrol, one of my favorite books. My favorite X-Men that got me into Marvel, which was reading these when I was in school, when I was a young man. I got to read some from a friend of mine. A lot of this stuff is reprinted, more than I thought, especially the Gold Keyed stuff. I think Hermes Press at one point started reprinting a lot of this material. So if you want to find it, it's out there. I think it's out of print, some of it, because I was looking at some of it, and it's pretty expensive. But it's fun to read. It's time dated, especially the TV material and stuff like that. But it was still, it's still very, very much fun to read, and I definitely recommend it. If you're looking to find this stuff, again, as I always say in every broadcast, if you look around, you might be able to find a lot of this stuff. A lot of it got reprinted in their comic books themselves for later issues when they stopped making new material. And you can find all this stuff in like dollar boxes at comic stores, Goodwills, garage sales, pawn stores. You look, any of those places that sell a lot of older stuff that people just don't want anymore. You might find some stuff like that. If you do, I do highly recommend doing it. And so I just hope you enjoyed what you saw and maybe piqued your interest a little bit to try some of this stuff. If you can, I'd do it. Like I said, you might find it fairly cheap because most of this is not mainstay stuff that people collect. So to Arnold Drake, wherever you're at, thank you, man. You gave me some of my favorite things that I collected in the 60s. And I really appreciate the hard work you went and put in this stuff together. And I hope that some people will grab onto some of this and maybe get some interest in it and keep your name alive and your legacy alive in comic books. And with that, please honor him and read it if you can. And I thank you.